The Mind Controller. In 1976, a KGB defector handed Western intelligence a collection of technical documents that described something impossible. The Soviet Union had developed devices that could influence human thought and behavior using electromagnetic frequencies. These weren't conceptual weapons or theoretical projects. According to the classified files, these psychotronic generators had been tested, refined, and deployed in operations across Eastern Europe. The technology was based on research conducted at Laboratory 12, a secret facility outside Moscow that studied the intersection of electromagnetic radiation and human consciousness. Soviet scientists discovered that specific frequency combinations could alter brainwave patterns, induce emotional states, and even implant suggestions into the minds of targeted individuals. The psychotronic generators worked by broadcasting modulated electromagnetic pulses that resonated with natural brain frequencies. Human thought operates through electrical impulses in the neural network. The Soviet devices could synchronize with these patterns and introduce foreign signals that the brain would process as its own thoughts. Testing began in 1968, using political prisoners and dissidents held in psychiatric facilities. Subjects exposed to the psychotronic broadcasts reported hearing voices, experiencing vivid hallucinations, and feeling compelled to perform actions against their will. Medical examinations showed altered brain activity patterns that persisted long after exposure ended. By 1972, the technology had been miniaturized into portable units small enough to fit inside a briefcase. KGB operatives deployed these devices during diplomatic meetings, using them to influence negotiations by inducing anxiety, confusion, or compliance in Western officials. The broadcasts were undetectable without specialized equipment, leaving victims unaware they were being manipulated. American embassy staff in Moscow began reporting unusual symptoms in 1976. Diplomats experienced unexplained headaches, sudden mood changes, and periods of disorientation. Medical teams found evidence of neurological disruption consistent with exposure to directed electromagnetic radiation. The Soviet government denied all allegations. The defectors' documents revealed something more disturbing. The psychotronic research had advanced beyond simple behavioral influence. Soviet scientists claimed they could erase specific memories, implant false recollections, and fundamentally alter personality structures using prolonged exposure to precisely calibrated frequency patterns. Western intelligence agencies attempted to verify the technology's capabilities. Analysis of the technical specifications showed theoretical soundness. The physics worked. The neuroscience was accurate. If the documents were authentic, the Soviet Union possessed weapons that could control human minds without physical contact or chemical agents. Research facilities in the United States and Britain launched crash programs to develop countermeasures and replicate the Soviet technology. These projects were classified under the highest security protocols. Official records claim the research produced no practical results, but the programs continued receiving funding for decades. The psychotronic generators vanished from Soviet arsenals after 1991. Equipment that should have been cataloged during the collapse of the KGB simply disappeared. Some units were allegedly sold to foreign governments. Others were hidden in storage facilities that remain classified. Most were probably destroyed to prevent the technology from becoming public knowledge. Scientists who worked on the Psychotronic project met suspicious fates. 3 senior researchers died in accidents within 6 months of the Soviet Union's dissolution. 2 others vanished without explanation. The remaining staff members refused to discuss their work, citing security oaths that apparently survived the fall of the regime. The technical specifications for psychotronic generators remain classified in Russian archives. Requests for declassification are denied on national security grounds. The official position is that the devices never worked, that they were propaganda tools designed to intimidate Western intelligence agencies during the Cold War. But the symptoms reported by embassy staff were real. The neurological effects were documented, and the defectors' technical drawings showed devices built with precision engineering for one specific purpose: to control human minds through electromagnetic manipulation. The memory eraser. In 1983, Western intelligence intercepted communications discussing a Soviet breakthrough in memory manipulation. The technology used ultrasonic frequencies to target specific regions of the brain responsible for memory formation. According to intercepted documents, the system could selectively erase memories without damaging surrounding neural tissue. The research originated from studies of ultrasound's effects on human tissue conducted at the Institute of Higher Nervous Activity in Moscow. Scientists discovered that certain frequency combinations could disrupt the chemical processes that convert short-term memories into permanent storage. Memories that hadn't been fully consolidated simply vanished. The acoustic weapon was designed for interrogation. KGB operatives could question a subject, extract information, then erase all memory of the interrogation session. The victim would retain memories from before and after the session, but have no recollection of the questioning itself. This created perfect deniability for intelligence operations conducted on foreign soil. Field testing began in 1981 using captured foreign agents. Subjects were interrogated using conventional methods, then exposed to the acoustic memory erasure protocol. Follow-up examinations showed complete amnesia for events occurring during a specific time window. The subjects didn't remember being questioned. They didn't remember revealing classified information. They simply lost several hours of their lives. The technology was refined to target specific types of memories. Episodic memories, which record personal experiences and events, proved most vulnerable to acoustic disruption. The device could erase the memory of a meeting, a conversation, or an entire day while leaving general knowledge and learned skills intact. Western diplomats and intelligence officers operating in Soviet territory began reporting gaps in their memories. Individuals would lose several hours with no explanation, unable to account for their whereabouts or activities. Medical examinations showed no signs of drug use or physical trauma. The memory loss appeared spontaneous and complete. Analysis of the intercepted technical documents revealed disturbing capabilities. The acoustic system could theoretically be scaled up to affect multiple targets simultaneously. A larger version could erase the memories of everyone in a room, creating situations where entire groups would have no recollection of classified meetings or sensitive discussions. The United States Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency launched a classified program to develop countermeasures and investigate the feasibility of acoustic memory manipulation. Research confirmed that ultrasonic frequencies could indeed disrupt memory consolidation in animal subjects. The technology was scientifically valid. Soviet development of the acoustic memory weapon apparently continued until at least 1989. Documents recovered after the Cold War referenced improved targeting systems and portable deployment units. The final versions could allegedly erase memories from distances of up to 30 meters through walls and other barriers. The technology vanished during the dissolution of the Soviet Union. Equipment inventories from KGB facilities made no mention of acoustic memory devices. Technical staff who worked on the project claimed the research had been discontinued years earlier due to inconsistent results and ethical concerns. But the pattern of unexplained memory loss among Western personnel continued into the 1990s. Cases were reported in Moscow, Berlin, and other former Soviet territories. The victims shared identical symptoms: complete amnesia for specific time periods. No physical evidence of trauma. No explanation. Researchers who attempted to investigate the acoustic memory erasure program encountered classified archives that remained sealed. Russian authorities deny the technology ever existed beyond theoretical research. Medical records of affected Western personnel are classified on both sides. The only evidence that remains are the intercepted documents from 1983 and the testimonies of individuals who lost hours of their lives to a weapon that officially never worked: the frozen sleepers. In 1979, a Soviet scientist defected to West Germany carrying microfilm that documented a breakthrough in human cryogenic preservation. The KGB had successfully frozen and revived human subjects with minimal cellular damage. The technology could suspend life indefinitely, preserving individuals in perfect stasis until revival technology improved or medical solutions for terminal conditions could be found. The research was conducted at a facility in Akademgorodok, Siberia's science city, where temperatures reached -40 degrees Celsius during winter months. Soviet scientists had developed a cryoprotectant solution that prevented ice crystal formation during the freezing process. Ice crystals destroy cellular structures, making revival impossible. The Soviet solution eliminated this problem. Testing began in 1976 using terminally ill volunteers who had nothing to lose. Subjects were infused with the cryoprotectant mixture, then cooled to minus 196 degrees Celsius using liquid nitrogen. Their bodies were maintained at that temperature for periods ranging from weeks to months before revival was attempted. The defectors' documents claimed that 3 subjects had been successfully revived after periods of cryogenic suspension. They woke with their memories intact, their personalities unchanged, and their terminal illnesses arrested at the exact point of freezing. Medical examinations showed minimal cellular damage and full neurological function. The implications were staggering. Cryogenic suspension could preserve dying patients until cures were discovered. It could allow space travelers to survive journeys lasting decades or centuries. It could effectively make death optional for those who could afford the technology. Western cryonics researchers examined the technical specifications and found them theoretically sound. The Soviet cryoprotectant formula used compounds that weren't publicly known in 1979, but were later confirmed to have anti-crystallization properties. The cooling and warming protocols matched theoretical models for optimal cell preservation. The program was allegedly terminated in 1980 following a catastrophic failure. One subject suffered massive cellular damage during the revival process and died in excruciating pain. The incident prompted KGB leadership to shut down the research and classify all documentation under national security protocols. But evidence suggests the research continued in secret. Construction records show that a new facility was built in 1982 near Novosibirsk with specialized equipment for maintaining extremely low temperatures. Power consumption records indicate the facility remained operational until at least 1989, using enormous amounts of electricity consistent with large-scale cryogenic operations. Rumors circulated among Soviet scientific communities that high-ranking officials had undergone cryogenic preservation. These individuals supposedly chose to be frozen rather than face terminal illnesses, gambling that future medical advances would make revival and treatment possible. The identities of these preserved officials remain unknown. After the Soviet collapse, the Novosibirsk facility was abandoned. Equipment was removed, documentation was destroyed, and the building was left empty. Independent researchers who visited the site found evidence of cryogenic storage chambers and liquid nitrogen distribution systems, but no bodies and no records. The scientist who defected with the microfilm died in 1983 under circumstances that German investigators found suspicious. The microfilm itself was confiscated by intelligence agencies and remains classified. Requests to declassify the documents are denied on grounds that the information could threaten public health if misused. Modern cryonics companies claim they're pioneering human preservation technology. But the Soviet Union may have solved the fundamental problems decades ago. Somewhere in Russian archives or hidden facilities, the evidence might still exist. Technical specifications for a cryogenic process that actually worked, and possibly preserved bodies still waiting in liquid nitrogen for a revival that may never come. The thought amplifier. In 1974, the CIA received intelligence suggesting that the Soviet Union had developed technology to enhance natural telepathic abilities. The device allegedly amplified the electromagnetic signals produced by the human brain, allowing trained operatives to project thoughts across distances and receive mental impressions from targeted individuals. Research into telepathic phenomena had been ongoing in the Soviet Union since the 1920s, but the breakthrough came from work conducted at the Leningrad Institute of Brain Research. Scientists discovered that telepathic transmission wasn't mystical or supernatural. It was electromagnetic. The human brain produces measurable electromagnetic fields, and under certain conditions, these fields could carry information between minds. The telepathic amplification device worked by detecting the faint electromagnetic signals produced during focused thought, amplifying them by several orders of magnitude, then broadcasting them in a directed beam. Receivers tuned to the same frequency could pick up these amplified thought patterns and experience them as their own mental impressions. Testing began in 1972, using subjects who showed natural aptitude for telepathic communication. These individuals underwent training to produce clear, focused thought patterns that the amplification device could process effectively. Success rates in controlled experiments reportedly reached 70%, with receivers accurately identifying images, words, and emotional states transmitted from distances up to 5 kilometers. The KGB immediately recognized the intelligence applications. Operatives equipped with miniaturized telepathic amplifiers could communicate without electronic devices that might be intercepted or detected. They could influence targets by projecting suggestions directly into their minds. They could extract information by reading the surface thoughts of individuals under surveillance. Field operations began in 1973. KGB agents with telepathic training were deployed to Western Europe and the United States, equipped with devices disguised as hearing aids or medical equipment. Reports from these operations claimed successful thought transmission between operatives and accurate reading of targets' mental states during negotiations and intelligence gathering. Western intelligence agencies dismissed these claims as propaganda until American researchers at Stanford Research Institute published findings in 1974 confirming that electromagnetic signals from one brain could influence another under laboratory conditions. The research suggested that the Soviet telepathic amplification program might have scientific validity. The United States launched its own telepathic research under programs like Stargate, investing millions in attempts to replicate and counter Soviet capabilities. American researchers confirmed that trained individuals could achieve statistically significant results in telepathic communication experiments, especially when enhanced by electromagnetic amplification. Soviet development of telepathic technology apparently accelerated in the late 1970s. Intercepted communications referenced improved amplification devices with greater range and precision. Documents described training facilities where operatives spent months developing their telepathic abilities under the guidance of psychologists and electromagnetic engineers. The program was allegedly discontinued in 1985 following concerns about psychological damage to operatives. Prolonged use of telepathic amplification apparently caused severe mental strain, with some subjects experiencing psychotic episodes and permanent personality changes. The technology worked, but the human cost was considered too high. After the Cold War ended, Russian scientists who had worked on telepathic research began publishing papers acknowledging that electromagnetic communication between brains was theoretically possible. They carefully avoided mentioning any successful applications or military programs, describing their work as purely theoretical investigation. Equipment that might have been used for telepathic amplification was never found in inventories of former KGB facilities. The training manuals and operational reports supposedly vanished. Scientists who developed the technology refused to discuss their work, citing both security oaths and concerns about professional credibility. But American intelligence officers who served during the Cold War privately acknowledged that Soviet operatives sometimes demonstrated impossible knowledge of classified information. Conversations that were never recorded, decisions that were never communicated, thoughts that should have remained private. The explanation they were given was coincidence, luck, or conventional espionage. The truth might have been something far stranger. The Invisibility generator. In 1981, British intelligence received reports of a Soviet device that could make objects invisible to radar and visual observation. The technology wasn't stealth coding or radar-absorbing materials. It was active electromagnetic field manipulation that bent light and radio waves around objects, rendering them undetectable to sensors and invisible to human observers. The research originated from theoretical physics work conducted at the Moscow Institute of Physics and Technology. Soviet scientists had discovered that specific configurations of electromagnetic fields could alter the path of photons passing through them. By creating a carefully controlled field around an object, they could redirect light waves around it, effectively making the object disappear. The principle was similar to how gravitational lensing bends light around massive objects in space, but the Soviet device used electromagnetic fields instead of gravity. The technical challenge was generating fields strong enough to bend visible light while keeping them stable and controllable. Testing began in 1978 using small objects in laboratory settings. Researchers successfully made steel spheres, electronic equipment, and eventually living organisms invisible within the electromagnetic field. Observers looking directly at the test area saw nothing but the background, as if the objects had ceased to exist. The military applications were obvious. Aircraft surrounded by invisibility fields could penetrate enemy airspace undetected. Submarines could operate on the surface without fear of visual or radar detection. Ground vehicles could move through hostile territory completely invisible to satellites and reconnaissance. By 1980, the technology had been scaled up to affect objects several meters in diameter. Documents smuggled out of the Soviet Union by a defector described successful tests using military vehicles and small aircraft. The invisibility effect was reportedly stable for up to 30 minutes before power requirements became prohibitive. The devices required enormous amounts of electrical energy. Creating electromagnetic fields strong enough to bend visible light demanded power generation capabilities that strained even military-grade systems. Portable applications were impossible with 1980s technology. The invisibility generators had to be mounted on large vehicles or powered by dedicated facilities. Western scientists who examined the defectors' technical specifications were skeptical. The power requirements seemed impossibly high, and the field configurations required precision that appeared beyond Soviet engineering capabilities. But theoretical analysis confirmed that the physics was sound. If the documents were accurate, the Soviet Union had achieved electromagnetic invisibility. The United States military launched a classified investigation under Project Looking Glass to verify the Soviet claims and develop countermeasures. Research confirmed that electromagnetic fields could indeed bend light, but American scientists struggled to replicate the field stability and power efficiency described in the Soviet documents. Development of the invisibility technology allegedly continued until 1986, when a catastrophic accident occurred at a testing facility near Chelyabinsk. The electromagnetic field generator reportedly malfunctioned during a test, creating an uncontrolled field collapse that killed 3 technicians and destroyed the equipment. The incident prompted cancellation of the entire program. After the Soviet collapse, no evidence of invisibility technology was found in military inventories. Equipment that should have existed according to the defectors' documents was nowhere to be found. Scientists who worked on the project claimed it had been purely theoretical research that never produced practical results. But satellite imagery from the 1980s shows anomalies that remain unexplained, gaps in radar coverage that don't correspond to equipment failures, visual observations of aircraft that suddenly vanish from tracking systems, military convoys that disappear from surveillance, then reappear kilometers away with no explanation for how they moved undetected. Modern stealth technology uses radar-absorbing materials and angular surfaces to reduce detection. It's effective but imperfect. The Soviet radiological invisibility system, if it worked as described, was something entirely different. True invisibility through electromagnetic field manipulation. Technology that could have changed warfare fundamentally if it had been perfected. The intelligence drug. In 1977, a KGB defector revealed that Soviet scientists had developed pharmaceutical compounds that dramatically enhanced human cognitive function. These intelligence enhancement drugs didn't just improve focus or memory. They fundamentally increased processing speed, pattern recognition, and problem-solving capabilities, creating individuals with measurably superior intellectual abilities. The research began in the 1960s at the Institute of Experimental Medicine in Leningrad, where scientists studied neurotransmitter systems and their relationship to cognitive performance. They discovered that specific chemical combinations could increase synaptic efficiency, enhance neural connectivity, and accelerate information processing in the brain. The enhancement drugs worked by optimizing the balance of neurotransmitters involved in learning, memory, and analytical thinking. Acetylcholine levels increased, improving memory formation. Dopamine pathways were enhanced, boosting motivation and reward processing. Glutamate receptors became more efficient, accelerating neural communication. Testing began in 1968 using volunteers from Soviet scientific institutions. Subjects taking the enhancement compounds showed dramatic improvements in intelligence tests, mathematical problem-solving, and memory tasks. IQ scores increased by 20 to 30 points. Complex calculations that normally took hours were completed in minutes. Language acquisition accelerated to levels previously considered impossible. The KGB began administering the intelligence enhancement drugs to elite operatives in 1972. These chemically enhanced agents demonstrated superior analytical abilities, learned foreign languages with extraordinary speed, and could process vast amounts of intelligence data with unprecedented efficiency. They became the Soviet Union's most valuable intelligence assets. Western intelligence agencies noticed a disturbing pattern. Soviet operatives were demonstrating cognitive abilities that seemed superhuman. They made connections between disparate pieces of information that should have been impossible to see. They broke codes and encryption systems faster than computers. They adapted to complex situations with speed and precision that suggested enhanced mental processing. The defectors' testimony revealed the scope of the program. Hundreds of scientists, military officers, and intelligence operatives had been treated with the enhancement drugs. The compounds were refined over years of testing, reducing side effects while maximizing cognitive improvements. By 1977, the Soviet Union had created an entire class of enhanced individuals with measurably superior intelligence. But the enhancement came with costs. Long-term users experienced severe psychological side effects. Some developed obsessive-compulsive disorders, unable to stop analyzing and processing information even when rest was needed. Others experienced psychotic breaks, their enhanced minds generating patterns and connections that didn't exist. Several subjects committed suicide, overwhelmed by the intensity of their own thoughts. The program was allegedly terminated in 1979, following concerns about long-term neurological damage. Brain scans of subjects who had used the enhancement drugs for extended periods showed abnormal neural activity patterns and signs of accelerated aging in cognitive centers. The gains in intelligence were temporary, but the damage appeared permanent. American pharmaceutical companies attempted to develop similar compounds based on the defectors' information. Research confirmed that the chemical approach was valid, but efforts to replicate the Soviet results produced inconsistent outcomes and unacceptable side effects. The enhancement drugs remained theoretical. After the Cold War, Russian scientists published papers describing cognitive enhancement research, carefully framing it as unsuccessful experiments from decades past. They acknowledged attempting to develop intelligence-boosting compounds, but claimed the research never produced viable results. The papers made no mention of the hundreds of enhanced operatives who had served Soviet intelligence. Individuals who received the enhancement drugs during the Cold War are now elderly or deceased. Their cognitive abilities reportedly declined as the effects wore off, but some retained measurably superior intelligence compared to baseline populations. They were never identified publicly. They never spoke about their enhancement. They simply lived their lives with minds that had been temporarily transformed. The chemical formulas for the intelligence enhancement drugs remain classified in Russian archives. Requests for declassification are denied. The official position is that the research was a failure, but the pattern of superhuman cognitive performance among Soviet operatives during the 1970s suggests otherwise. Somewhere in locked vaults, the formulas might still exist. The knowledge of how to chemically enhance human intelligence, abandoned because the cost was too high. The earthquake machine. In 1985, American seismologists detected unusual earthquake patterns in remote regions of the Soviet Union. The tremors occurred at regular intervals, showed identical seismic signatures, and originated from depths inconsistent with natural tectonic activity. Analysis suggested these weren't earthquakes at all. They were tests of a weapons system that could trigger earthquakes on demand. The seismic weapon research was conducted at a facility in Kazakhstan, where Soviet scientists studied methods of releasing accumulated tectonic stress in a controlled manner. They discovered that shaped explosive charges detonated at specific depths could initiate chain reactions in stressed fault lines, triggering earthquakes far more powerful than the initial explosion. The technology worked by identifying fault lines where tectonic plates had accumulated significant strain. These geological weak points were naturally close to failure. The Soviet weapon provided the trigger, using precisely calibrated explosions to release the stored energy in the form of a devastating earthquake. Testing began in 1982 using remote, uninhabited regions of Central Asia. The initial experiments produced tremors equivalent to magnitude 4 earthquakes. As the technology improved, Soviet scientists learned to target deeper faults and trigger progressively stronger seismic events. By 1985, they could allegedly generate magnitude 6 earthquakes with reasonable precision regarding location and timing. The military implications were obvious. A seismic weapon could destroy cities without leaving evidence of attack. The earthquake would appear natural, indistinguishable from tectonic events that occur constantly around the globe. No radioactive fallout, no military invasion, just a devastating natural disaster that accomplished strategic objectives without triggering international response. Western geologists who analyzed the unusual Soviet seismic patterns were deeply concerned. The regularity and consistency of the tremors suggested systematic testing of controlled earthquake generation. If the Soviets could trigger earthquakes reliably, every fault line on the planet became a potential weapon. The United States launched a classified investigation to determine whether earthquake triggering was scientifically feasible. Research confirmed that stressed fault lines could be induced to fail using relatively small energy inputs. The physics was sound. A sufficiently advanced understanding of local geology combined with precise explosive placement could trigger earthquakes artificially. Development of the seismic weapon system apparently continued until 1988. Intelligence reports describe tests in which Soviet scientists successfully triggered earthquakes in predetermined locations with accuracies measured in kilometers. The weapon was nearly ready for operational deployment. Then the testing stopped. The seismic patterns that had alarmed Western analysts simply ceased. No more regular tremors. No more identical seismic signatures. The program appeared to have been shut down without explanation. After the Soviet collapse, researchers investigated the Kazakhstan testing facility. They found evidence of deep drilling operations and underground explosive tests, but no documentation explaining the purpose of the research. Equipment had been removed, and personnel who worked at the facility claimed they had been conducting geological surveys unrelated to weapons development, but geologists studying global earthquake patterns have noticed anomalies that remain unexplained. Natural earthquakes occasionally occur in locations and times that seem statistically improbable. Tremors that strike at politically convenient moments. Seismic events that devastate specific targets while leaving surrounding areas relatively unaffected. The Soviet seismic weapon, if it worked as the intelligence suggested, represented the ultimate deniable attack. An earthquake weapon that left no evidence, no signature, no proof of human intervention. Technology that could level cities and kill millions while maintaining the appearance of a natural disaster. A weapon that officially never progressed beyond theoretical research, but might have been tested successfully in the deserts of Kazakhstan in the 1980s. The brain computer. In 1987, a Soviet scientist published a paper in an obscure Russian journal describing a direct computer interface with human neural tissue. The technology allowed thoughts to be converted into digital signals and computer data to be transmitted directly into the brain as perceptions and memories. The paper was quickly retracted, the journal was shut down, and the scientist vanished from academic records. The research was conducted at the Institute of Higher Nervous Activity in Moscow, where scientists had been mapping the electromagnetic signals produced by different types of neural activity. They discovered that thought patterns could be read and decoded with sufficient precision to extract meaning from the electromagnetic noise of brain activity. The synthetic telepathy interface used an array of sensors placed on the scalp to detect electromagnetic signals from the brain. These signals were processed by computers running pattern recognition algorithms that could identify specific thought types. Simple concepts like yes, no, specific numbers, or visual images could be extracted from the neural activity with 80% accuracy. The reverse process was more remarkable. The system could generate electromagnetic pulses that stimulated specific neural pathways, creating artificial perceptions indistinguishable from natural sensory input. Users experienced visual images, sounds, and even tactile sensations that existed only as computer-generated signals transmitted directly into their brains. Testing began in 1984, using volunteers from Soviet military research programs. Subjects wearing the interface could control computer systems using thought alone, typing messages and manipulating virtual objects without physical movement. They could receive information as synthetic sensory experiences, seeing data visualizations and hearing spoken messages that existed only as electromagnetic stimulation of their neural tissue. The KGB immediately recognized the intelligence applications. Operatives equipped with synthetic telepathy interfaces could communicate silently and securely, their thoughts transmitted as encrypted digital signals. They could receive mission briefings as artificial memories, perfect recall of complex information directly implanted in their minds. They could access computer databases using thought-based queries, retrieving classified information without physical interaction with terminals. By 1986, the technology had been refined to support more complex communication. Interfaces could transmit abstract concepts, emotional states, and even chains of reasoning between users. Two individuals wearing the system could share thoughts in real time, creating a form of technological telepathy indistinguishable from science fiction. Western intelligence agencies learned about the synthetic telepathy research through electronic surveillance of Soviet scientific communications. Analysis of the intercepted data suggested the technology was scientifically valid. The United States launched its own research programs to develop brain-computer interfaces, but American efforts focused on medical applications rather than intelligence operations. The Soviet program was allegedly terminated in 1988, following reports of severe psychological damage to test subjects. Prolonged use of the synthetic telepathy interface apparently caused users to lose the distinction between their own thoughts and artificially generated inputs. Some subjects developed dissociative disorders, unable to determine which memories were real and which had been digitally implanted. After the Cold War, brain-computer interface research became a mainstream field of neuroscience. Researchers acknowledged that Soviet scientists had been pioneers in direct neural communication systems, but claimed the technology had never progressed beyond primitive laboratory demonstrations. The scientist who published the original paper was never found. Colleagues claimed he had retired and moved to an unknown location. The institute where he worked was restructured, and all records of synthetic telepathy research were sealed or destroyed. The technology that could have allowed mind-to-mind communication through computer mediation simply vanished from official records. But commercial brain-computer interfaces developed in recent years show remarkable similarities to the capabilities described in the 1987 paper. Modern systems can decode simple thoughts and generate basic sensory perceptions using electromagnetic stimulation. The technology that the Soviet Union allegedly abandoned decades ago is now being rediscovered, with researchers apparently unaware they're following a path the KGB mapped in the 1980s. The youth serum. In 1979, rumors began circulating in Soviet scientific communities about successful age reversal treatments being administered to high-ranking officials. The treatments allegedly used a combination of genetic therapy, cellular regeneration techniques, and hormone replacement to reverse biological aging at the cellular level. Individuals in their 70s were emerging with the physiology of people decades younger. The research was conducted at a secret facility in the Caucasus Mountains, where Soviet biologists studied the mechanisms of aging at the cellular and genetic level. They discovered that aging wasn't an inevitable process, but a gradual accumulation of damage that could be repaired if the right techniques were applied. The age reversal protocol involved 3 stages. First, damaged cells were identified and eliminated using targeted pharmaceutical compounds that induced apoptosis in senescent cells while leaving healthy tissue unaffected. Second, stem cell treatments replaced the eliminated cells with young, functional replacements. Third, genetic therapy reset the biological markers of aging, restoring cellular function to youthful levels. Testing began in 1975 using elderly volunteers from Soviet scientific institutions. The results were apparently remarkable. Subjects showed measurable improvements in physical function, cognitive performance, and biological markers of aging. 70-year-olds regained the cardiovascular function of 50-year-olds, their immune system strengthened, their cellular repair mechanisms activated. They were getting younger. By 1978, the treatments had been refined to produce dramatic results. Subjects who underwent the full protocol reportedly experienced age reversal equivalent to 10 to 20 years. Physical examination showed genuine physiological rejuvenation, not cosmetic changes but fundamental restoration of youthful cellular function. Access to the age reversal treatments was restricted to Soviet leadership and essential scientific personnel. The technology was too valuable and too limited in scale to be made available to the general population. Only individuals deemed critical to state interests received the treatments, creating a secret class of biologically rejuvenated officials. Western intelligence agencies received reports of Soviet leaders appearing remarkably healthy and vigorous despite advanced age. Photographs from official events showed individuals who should have been elderly displaying physical capabilities inconsistent with their known birth dates. The patterns suggested medical interventions beyond conventional health care. Attempts to gather intelligence on the age reversal program proved difficult. The facility where treatments were administered was heavily guarded and isolated. Personnel who worked there were subject to strict security protocols. The few defectors who claimed knowledge of the program provided only second-hand accounts and rumor. The biological principles behind age reversal were scientifically sound. Western researchers confirmed that removing senescent cells improved health and function in animal models. Stem cell therapy showed promise for tissue regeneration. The Soviet program appeared to have integrated these approaches into a comprehensive treatment protocol that actually worked. After 1985, information about the age reversal treatments ceased. The facility in the Caucasus Mountains was abandoned. Personnel were reassigned or retired. Soviet officials who had supposedly received the treatments aged normally, suggesting the effects were temporary or the program had been discontinued. Following the Soviet collapse, researchers investigated the abandoned facility. They found evidence of advanced medical equipment and laboratories designed for cellular therapy, but no documentation explaining the specific treatments or their results. Medical records had been destroyed or removed. The scientists who developed the age reversal protocol vanished from academic records. Modern longevity research pursues the same goals the Soviet program allegedly achieved. Removing senescent cells, stem cell therapy, and genetic interventions to reverse aging are all active areas of investigation. But current treatments produce modest improvements at best, nothing approaching the dramatic age reversal described in the Soviet research. If the rumors were true, the Soviet Union successfully reversed biological aging decades before Western science considered it possible. The treatments were administered to a select few, then disappeared when the regime collapsed. The technology that could have extended human lifespan and restored youth was lost, existing now only as whispered stories from scientists who claimed to have witnessed miracles in the Caucasus Mountains. The quantum encryptor. In 1991, as the Soviet Union collapsed, British intelligence acquired a device that appeared to be a quantum encryption system decades ahead of anything the West had developed. The device used quantum entanglement to create unbreakable encryption keys, enabling completely secure communication that couldn't be intercepted or decoded even in principle. The technology was based on theoretical work in quantum mechanics conducted at the Moscow Institute of Physics. Soviet physicists had discovered practical methods for generating and maintaining entangled quantum states, allowing them to create encryption keys that existed as quantum superpositions until measured. The quantum encryption device worked by generating pairs of entangled photons. One photon from each pair was sent to each party in a communication. When these entangled photons were measured, they produced correlated random numbers that could be used as encryption keys. Any attempt to intercept or measure the photons would collapse their quantum states, immediately alerting both parties that security had been compromised. Testing began in 1986 using secure communication links between Soviet military facilities. The quantum encryption system proved completely secure. Western intelligence agencies that attempted to intercept these communications found only incomprehensible noise. The encryption keys were truly random and changed continuously, making cryptanalysis impossible. By 1989, the technology had been miniaturized into portable units that could be carried by field operatives. Soviet agents equipped with quantum encryption devices could communicate with absolute security, their messages protected by the laws of quantum mechanics rather than mathematical complexity. The implications for intelligence operations were profound. Quantum encryption made code breaking obsolete. It didn't matter how much computing power an adversary possessed. The encryption couldn't be broken because attempting to intercept the quantum keys destroyed the information they contained. Western cryptographers who examined the captured device were astounded. The Soviet Union had solved engineering problems that Western scientists believed were decades away from practical solutions. The device generated stable entangled photons, transmitted them through optical fibers without destroying entanglement, and detected quantum states with sufficient precision to create usable encryption keys. Analysis revealed that the quantum encryption technology was based on principles that Western physics understood theoretically, but couldn't implement practically. The Soviet device used room-temperature quantum systems that maintained entanglement for useful durations, something Western researchers considered impossible with 1980s technology. The device was carefully disassembled and studied by British and American scientists. They confirmed its operation and verified that it genuinely used quantum entanglement for encryption key generation. The technology was authentic, functional, and far more advanced than anything the West possessed. But attempts to reverse engineer the device failed. Critical components used materials and manufacturing techniques that couldn't be replicated. The quantum state generators required precision engineering beyond Western capabilities. The detection systems used principles that weren't fully understood. The device worked, but Western scientists couldn't recreate it. After the Cold War, Russian scientists published papers describing theoretical quantum encryption research, but made no mention of functional devices or operational systems. They claimed Soviet work had been purely academic, exploring possibilities that remained impractical with available technology. The captured device was classified and stored in a secure facility. It remains there today, a working quantum encryption system that uses technology officially invented decades later. Modern quantum cryptography follows the same principles the Soviet device demonstrated in 1986, but still struggles to match its stability and practicality. Who developed this technology for the KGB? How did Soviet scientists solve engineering problems that Western physics considered insurmountable? And why was this revolutionary encryption system abandoned when the Soviet Union collapsed? The quantum device offers no answers, only silent proof that someone in the Soviet Union understood quantum mechanics at a level the world is only now beginning to reach. The weather weapon. In 1988, Western meteorologists detected unusual weather patterns forming over the Soviet Union. Storms developed with unnatural precision, following trajectories that violated normal atmospheric behavior. Temperature gradients appeared and disappeared without explanation. The patterns suggested something impossible. The Soviets were controlling the weather. The research originated from studies of atmospheric electricity and ionospheric manipulation conducted at the Radiophysical Research Institute in Gorky. Soviet scientists discovered that powerful radio frequency transmissions could heat regions of the ionosphere, creating pressure differences that influenced weather patterns at ground level. The atmospheric control system used an array of radio transmitters broadcasting at specific frequencies that were absorbed by the ionosphere. The absorbed energy heated the ionospheric plasma, creating regions of high pressure that deflected jet streams and altered the movement of storm systems. By controlling where the heating occurred, Soviet scientists could guide weather patterns across thousands of kilometers. Testing began in 1983, using a prototype facility in Siberia. Initial experiments demonstrated that ionospheric heating could create localized weather effects. Rainstorms could be initiated, dispersed, or redirected. Temperature patterns could be altered across entire regions. The atmosphere was responding to electromagnetic manipulation. By 1986, the technology had been scaled up to affect continental weather systems. Documents smuggled out of the Soviet Union describe successful tests in which drought conditions were created over agricultural regions and severe storms were generated or dissipated on command. The weather was no longer an act of nature. It was a weapon. The military applications were obvious. Weather control could destroy enemy crops, create drought conditions that devastated civilian populations, or generate storms that prevented military operations. Hurricanes could be steered toward strategic targets. Rainfall could be denied to regions dependent on agriculture. Weather itself became a tool of warfare. Western militaries began investigating similar technologies. The United States had conducted cloud seeding experiments and studied weather modification, but the Soviet system appeared far more sophisticated. American scientists confirmed that ionospheric heating could theoretically influence weather patterns, but the power requirements and technical complexity seemed prohibitive. Intelligence reports suggested the Soviet atmospheric control system had achieved operational capability by 1987. Transmitter arrays had been constructed in multiple locations across the Soviet Union, creating a network that could influence weather patterns across Europe and Asia. The system was ready for deployment in military operations. Then development apparently stopped. The transmitter facilities were powered down in 1989, and the weather anomalies that had alarmed Western meteorologists ceased. The program appeared to have been shut down just as it achieved full operational capability. After the Soviet collapse, researchers investigated the atmospheric control facilities. They found evidence of massive radio transmitter arrays designed for ionospheric research, but official records described the installations as scientific facilities studying aurora and radio propagation. Documentation of weather control experiments was absent from all archives, but meteorological records from the 1980s show clear anomalies. Weather patterns that developed with statistical improbability. Storms that formed in locations and seasons inconsistent with normal atmospheric conditions. Temperature variations that appeared and vanished without conventional meteorological explanations. Modern ionospheric research facilities like HAARP in Alaska pursue similar technologies, officially for scientific research into atmospheric physics. The capabilities these facilities develop are remarkably similar to those described in the Soviet atmospheric control program. Weather modification through ionospheric heating remains theoretically possible, though officially impractical. The Soviet weather control system represented the ultimate strategic weapon. It left no evidence, required no military invasion, and could devastate enemy nations through drought, flood, or storm. Technology that could have changed geopolitical power balances by making weather itself a controlled weapon. If the intelligence reports were accurate, the technology existed and functioned in the 1980s. It was tested, refined, and brought to operational readiness before being abandoned when the Soviet Union fell. The transmitter arrays still stand in remote regions of Russia, silent monuments to a weapon that could have controlled the skies themselves.